So a year on, what is the Paralympic legacy? Attitudes may have changed, but has the transport network kept pace? Or are disabled people still left fighting a losing battle against London's transport network? There are signs of a real Paralympic legacy. An advertising campaign has encouraged people with buggies to make way for wheelchair users. And some tube stations have humps and ramps so disabled people can get on and off. But the fight continues. There are no plans to make London's new Crossrail system 100% accessible. And the last step-free station upgrade on the tube network was Blackfriars 18 months ago.
Yeah, OK, that's not going to happen.
Please mind the gap between the train and the platform.
More than 3/4 of tube stations on the network still have no step-free access.
I think the government really trying hard at improving disabled access and getting more disabled people into work, but I do think a lot more needs to be done.
The news leaked earlier this month that Transport for London is considering closing ticket offices at every single tube station in a bid to save money has today prompted leading disability charities to warn that transport improvements could be reversed because of funding cuts. Jeffrey relies on the support of TfL staff to travel. For him, ticket offices are as relevant as they ever were.
There are some stations where I can independently go in and get on the train, but only when I learn and have done the trip several times do I know about it. So staff are the people who guide me to that.
The mayor is adamant the pace of change won't suffer. He says he's committed to making London a fully inclusive world city. There's no doubting the Paralympics has prompted a huge culture shift. But disabled people recently reported more difficulties using public transport than 3 years ago. Luke Hanrahan, ITV News.
Well, I'm delighted to say for more on this, I'm joined now by Tim Hollingsworth, the Chief Executive of the British Paralympic Association. Thank you very much for coming in. A year on, are you disappointed that although at the time, a year ago this week, the Paralympics really did transform attitudes in a very positive way, but people are still, on a daily basis, just struggling to get in and around the city?
Well, I'm disappointed for that fact, because you wouldn't want it to be the case, but rather like one of our great athletes, Sophie, said in that piece, you know, I'm not necessarily disappointed that the Paralympics hasn't achieved that in 1 year. I mean, I think there is definitely a sort of platform that came out of London that is allowing all these issues to be far more out in the open than they were before. You know, whether or not you'd have done this piece without the Paralympics is one very small example.
Yeah,
you know? So actually, it's more about 1 year on. What are we talking about now? What are the issues that we're facing? And you know, if this is a journey, we're by no means at the summit. We're still probably in the foothills, but we've got a really good base camp now to try and make things better.
Yeah, you wanted the Paralympics to be a shop window for the issues surrounding Paralympians and you know, people with disabilities, and it certainly was. But it's hard to capitalise on that in terms of putting pressure on people that can actually make changes. And is that something that you've got time to get involved in when you're running the association?
Principally, our job is to help our athletes to win medals, because I think, as last year showed, if we do that, then people see great role models and positive attitudes, if you like, a change towards disability. But it's what that leads on to, and I think it's a great debate to be having, and actually a very positive debate to be having 1 year on, because nobody is suggesting that everything is perfect. You actually saw some change already in place there. I think the government, as Sophie said again in her interview, is doing a lot more on the back of London to consider what needs to change. But it's a generational thing, perhaps, in terms of everything that we want to see happen. We've built the tube network over decades, you know, to get it to this place, but actually we're only really addressing some of the key accessibility issues in the last 12 months.
Sure, but it's depressing to learn, isn't it, about Crossrail, a whole new project that isn't going to be accessible.
I think that's one really good example of where actually pressure can be put on. I think it's right that it is. You asked me about the British Paralympic Association. I think we absolutely fundamentally believe that our job is to help bring those athletes into the public eye and the spotlight through their achievement and their performances. And it really is all about the sport. But that sport, as we saw last year, can inspire a really good conversation about disability, can inspire disabled people to think more differently about their lives, and more importantly, perhaps, non-disabled people to think, and their perceptions maybe weren't what they thought they were. So all of that's positive, and I think we should celebrate that 1 year on.
I read an article today that, so you've been interviewed 2 years ago, where you were talking about there was going to be a push to promote tickets for the Paralympics. We had no idea, did we, until a year ago, that it was going to be such a magical event, that it was going to create such excitement, arguably as much, if not more so, than the Olympics. You must be thrilled looking back.
Yeah, I think nobody expected the scale of what we got. We hoped for it, but we didn't necessarily expect it. And I think ideally you'd want to have another Paralympics this year to keep that momentum going. We can't do that, so what we're trying to do is find ways to bring that magic and that excitement
And
back.
how do you do that? Because the anniversary games was one day.
Yeah.
It was as magical.
We've got another day
but-
coming up on 7th of September in the park. There's a huge event, free event on the park, actually. We've got some sport going on in the Copper Box. 4 of our different sports are playing international matches, so people can remember some of the thrills of the sport itself. But there's also, through partners like the GLA and the London Legacy Development Corporation, big arts and community sport festivals going on as well. So it's another opportunity to get people back onto the park and celebrate the Games.
Very briefly, just over 1,000 days till Rio. Do you think Rio Paralympics can be anywhere close to what we saw in London? Because everyone would want that, wouldn't they?
I sincerely hope so. It'll do nothing more for the movement than for Rio to be a better Games than London. I think there's some challenges there, but equally it's a great nation for sport, and it's a great nation also for disability sport. So hopefully we can see that in 2016.
OK, Tim Hollingsworth, thank you very much for coming in to talk to me. Thank you.